This video does not confirm or diagnose any medical condition. Any health-related mentions are purely alleged and discussed in a general commentary context.
Y'all, what happens when a single voice rips the curtain off Hollywood's most protected silence, and the industry freezes instead of fighting back? Late night lives, uncut interviews, no filters. Charleston White stepped into the fire and claimed the unthinkable, that behind the glamour, behind the red carpets, there's a culture trained to contain, not confront. Not to protect people, but to protect power. According to him, this isn't about gossip, it's about risk management. About what allegedly gets buried when brands are worth more than human fallout. He alleges documents surfaced. He alleges names were whispered. And he alleges a system moved fast. Lawyers circling, NDAs tightening, publicists rewriting reality. Before questions could breathe. At the center of the storm, Teyana Taylor. Not accused here as fact, but positioned by Charleston's claims as the gravity well around which panic allegedly formed. Silence followed. Projects shifted. Appearances multiplied. Because movement creates noise, and noise, he claims, becomes camouflage. This isn't framed as romance. Not a diss track. Not leaked DMs. It's painted as a quiet emergency, where distress is managed with isolation, credibility is questioned in private, and anyone who looks unstable is quietly edged out so the machine can keep humming. He says proximity alone became dangerous. That even hinting at connections was enough to trigger meetings that never make calendars. Media, he alleges, hesitated. Stories stalled. Tips died in legal review. Access became leverage. Ask too much, doors close. That's how containment works. No headlines, no accountability, just a smooth surface and a deeper fracture underneath. Charleston insists he's not here to burn careers. He's here to expose a culture where silence is rewarded and honesty is punished. Where trust erodes invisibly until one voice says pause, and everyone listens.
Yeah, that's, she's delivering a whole spirit amongst young girls. She's introducing, we've had a gangster spirit. The gangster spirit damn near wiped the young black males out. This whole spirit is fit to do a number on the young black girls.
Y'all, Hollywood didn't wake up to a scandal. It woke up to a silence, so loud it rattled closed doors and private phones across the industry. No press conference. No denials. No carefully staged outrage. Just a sudden stillness. And according to Charleston White, that stillness is the tell. What he described in recent interviews and live sessions wasn't framed as proof, facts, or verdicts. He repeatedly positioned it as allegations, claims circulating behind the scenes, and whispers that powerful systems rush to smother before they ever meet daylight. In his telling, this wasn't a messy breakup or a viral DM leak. It was a portrait of an industry trained to protect brands at any cost, even when people quietly unravel. At the center of the claim sits Teyana Taylor, not as a confirmed villain, not as a convicted anything, but as a name Charleston says became surrounded by panic once unverified health-related rumors began circulating privately. He did not present authenticated documents on record. He did not produce court filings. He described what he alleges others saw, others discussed, and how quickly the machinery moved to contain questions rather than answer them. Containment, in this narrative, is everything. According to Charleston, when sensitive rumors surface, especially those involving personal health or liability, the response isn't transparency. It's motion, travel, appearances, a packed schedule. Because stillness invites scrutiny, and scrutiny threatens control. Noise distracts. Distraction protects. And protection, he says, is the real currency. He described closed-door meetings that never appear on calendars. Verbal guidance that leaves no paper trail. Legal teams hovering without issuing statements. Publicists nudging narratives just enough to redirect curiosity. The goal, he claims, is never accountability. The goal is to keep panic contained and liability invisible. Names began to circulate in the chatter he referenced. Never as proven facts, never as courtroom findings, but as proximity claims, alleged connections, and whispered associations. He spoke of Iman Shumpert as someone he claims noticed something was wrong long before the public saw anything at all. Not through headlines.
I bet she got HPV. I bet she done had chlamydia, gonorrhea, trigonometry, crabs, and whatever else that can contract. Hell, you talking about she too motherfucking nasty, mannish, fierce at the mouth, and she ain't got them high dollar weed. Everybody done tough.
In that environment, movement becomes mandatory. Work becomes armor. Smiles become strategy. Teyana Taylor is framed again not as a proven source of anything, but as a figure whose visibility, according to Charleston's claims, never slowed. Appearances stacked. Travel continued. Creative output stayed loud. Because stillness invites inspection, and inspection invites records. Noise, he argues, keeps everything blurry enough to survive. He describes how concern is handled when it surfaces privately. Not with support, not with clarity, but with caution. People are advised to protect themselves without being told what they're protecting themselves from. Vague warnings replace information. Trust erodes quietly. When you sense danger but can't name it, your mind fills in the worst possibilities. That's how relationships crack without confrontation. That's how people drift without closure. Charleston insists that this phase produces a specific kind of tragedy, the slow discrediting of anyone who looks affected. If someone shows distress, the narrative shifts to their stability. If they question too much, they're framed as difficult. If they pull away, they're labeled unreliable. The system doesn't have to silence them directly. It just has to make their voice expensive to believe. He points to patterns that fans often miss in real time. Projects that stall for creative reasons. Collaborations teased and then quietly abandoned. Public chemistry that evaporates without explanation. In isolation, each moment looks normal. Together, they form a trail of avoidance. In his view, Hollywood relies on fragmentation because patterns are only dangerous when people connect them. The alleged infrastructure, he describes, grows more visible the longer you stare at it. Reputation managers coordinating tone across outlets. Legal teams advising silence while encouraging productivity. Verbal agreements replacing written ones to avoid records. Meetings that end with nothing decided publicly and everything decided privately. It's a system designed to leave no fingerprints. Media, he argues, becomes the final filter. Stories arrive incomplete by design, stripped of specifics, padded with ambiguity, softened by phrases like sources say and according to insiders. Legal review trims edges until nothing sharp remains. The audience senses something happened but can't grasp what. Confusion does the rest. Engagement drops. The cycle moves on. What makes his commentary feel like a courtroom closing argument isn't a certainty, it's the insistence on motive. He doesn't claim omniscience. He claims incentives. Brands survive through silence. Access is preserved through compliance. And when reputations are worth millions, discomfort becomes negotiable. Human fallout, he suggests, is absorbed as a cost of doing business. He returns to the idea that this isn't about turning one person into a villain or scrubbing others clean. It's about a culture that treats truth as optional when it threatens stability. Where honesty is praised in speeches, but punished in practice. Where silence isn't just encouraged, it's rewarded with continued access, protection, and opportunity. The emotional toll, he alleges, is the part no one budgets for. When people feel something is wrong but can't speak without consequences, they internalize the pressure. Sleep fractures. Trust collapses. Behavior shifts. Fans later call it a breakdown. Insiders call it burnout. Charleston calls it the cost of containment. He suggests that audiences are more perceptive than the industry assumes. Viewers notice when energy changes, when joy looks forced, when people who once seemed grounded start moving like they're being chased by something invisible. Even without facts, patterns register. Suspicion grows not from proof, but from repetition. The most unsettling claim he makes isn't about documents or names. It's about time. He argues that the industry counts on exhaustion. If it can delay long enough, outrage cools. Curiosity fades. New scandals arrive. Eventually, questions feel old. At that point, the story doesn't need to be disproven. It just needs to be forgotten. But forgetting has limits. He warns that trust, once eroded, doesn't regenerate on command. Audiences may move on, but they don't fully reset. Skepticism lingers. Every unexplained absence, every sudden pivot, every overly polished appearance adds weight. The surface stays smooth. The foundation weakens. Charleston ends his commentary not with a verdict, but with a warning. Systems built on silence eventually face a moment where silence stops working. Not because a single truth emerges, but because too many half-truths collide. When people stop accepting nothing to see here as an answer, containment loses its power. He insists again that he isn't calling for destruction. He's calling for awareness. For recognizing how easily human damage gets normalized when brands are protected at all costs. For questioning why an industry obsessed with storytelling goes quiet when the story gets uncomfortable. What remains after the claims isn't certainty, it's unease. Not because of what was proven, but because of what was avoided. In a world that thrives on spectacle, refusal to engage becomes suspicious. When no one steps forward to clarify, deny, or contextualize, the void speaks louder than any accusation. The tragedy in this telling isn't a single scandal. It's the normalization of silence. The quiet agreement that some questions are too expensive to ask. The acceptance that trust can be sacrificed as long as the machine keeps moving. And that's why this doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a pause, a held breath, a moment before audiences decide whether they'll keep consuming polished surfaces or start listening to the cracks underneath. Because secrets don't vanish on their own. They wait. Y'all, this is where the story stops being entertainment and starts feeling personal. Because what happens when silence becomes policy and truth becomes a liability? What happens when the industry you grew up admiring decides that your trust is disposable as long as the brand survives? That's the betrayal sitting at the center of this storm. This isn't about proving anything in a courtroom. It's about patterns that refuse to disappear. About faces that changed overnight. About careers that slowed without explanation. About voices that went quiet not because they were wrong, but because speaking became too dangerous. That kind of silence doesn't protect people. It protects systems. And here's the part that should unsettle you the most. If these claims were harmless, they would have been crushed instantly. If they were absurd, they would have been laughed away. Instead, we got distance. We got avoidance. We got nothing. In an industry addicted to control, nothing is never nothing. Behind every polished appearance, there's a cost you don't see. Behind every forced smile, there's pressure you're not meant to question. And when the machine decides you're a risk, it doesn't attack you publicly. It lets you fade. Quietly. Cleanly. Without accountability. This is the kind of story they hope burns out before it burns through. They're counting on distraction. They're counting on fatigue. They're counting on you scrolling past and forgetting. Because once attention dies, silence wins. But here's the truth they can't manage. Audiences aren't blind anymore. People feel when something is off. And once trust cracks, it never fully repairs. Every unexplained move adds weight. Every unanswered question lingers. So ask yourself, how many stories died like this before? How many warnings were ignored? And how long can an industry survive on silence before the silence turns on them? If you're still watching, you already know this isn't over. It's just waiting to be finished. The silence didn't break after the claims, it hardened. Phones stopped ringing. Calendars suddenly filled up. And according to Charleston White, that shift is never accidental. It's procedural. He describes a moment when whispers cross an invisible line and the industry's reflexes kick in, not to investigate, but to insulate. No statements are drafted because statements invite follow-ups. No denials are issued because denials create a record. What happens instead is quieter, colder, and far more effective. Behind closed doors, he alleges, reputations are triaged like liabilities. Who needs distance? Who needs distraction? Who needs to disappear for a while so the temperature drops? It's not punishment. It's damage control. In this version of events, people don't get canceled, they get managed. And the first thing management does is isolate the narrative from the public's curiosity. According to his account, once unverified health-related rumors began circulating privately, the priority became motion. Appearances stacked back to back. Travel schedules tightened. Visibility increased. Because when someone is everywhere, questions struggle to land anywhere. Teyana Taylor is framed here not as a proven offender, but as a focal point around which panic allegedly organized. No confirmed reports. No court filings. Just an atmosphere of urgency that suggested something had gone wrong behind the scenes. Charleston claims that the industry's most reliable tool isn't the NDA, it's confusion. When too many explanations float at once, audiences grow tired of sorting truth from noise. He suggests that's why stories fracture. One outlet hints, another backs off. A third runs a safer angle about mental health or creative burnout. The core issue never makes it to print, and the fog does the rest. He describes alleged private conversations where concern was acknowledged, but never addressed. People were advised, not helped. Warned, not protected. And when distress surfaced publicly, anxiety, erratic behavior, emotional withdrawal, it was reframed as personal instability rather than a reaction to pressure. In his telling, that reframing is deliberate. Once someone is labeled unreliable, their words lose weight without ever being disproven. The courtroom energy of his commentary is unmistakable. He doesn't ask for belief. He asks for patterns to be noticed. Projects delayed without explanation. Collaborations quietly shelved. Invitations that never arrive. In Hollywood, absence is testimony. And he argues that too many absences followed the same script to be coincidence. He alleges that Iman Shumpert felt this shift early, not through headlines but through silence. Conversations changed tone. Trust thinned. Emotional distance replaced familiarity. No public feud. No messy fallout. Just a slow cooling that suggested something unspeakable had entered the room. According to Charleston, when someone senses risk but isn't given information, paranoia fills the gap. And paranoia corrodes relationships faster than truth ever could. The names that surfaced in his commentary weren't presented as defendants in a case. They were presented as examples of proximity and power. Drake and Chris Brown were mentioned in the context of how quickly circles close when reputations are intertwined. He stopped short of accusations, emphasizing instead how association alone can trigger containment protocols. In this world, he suggests, being near a problem is sometimes enough to become one. One of the darker threads in his narrative centers on emotional fallout. He alleges that Aaron Pierre appeared overwhelmed by pressures that didn't match public narratives of success. According to Charleston, what fans later interpreted as confusion or instability looked more like the shock of realizing how disposable individuals become once risk enters the equation. When questions are discouraged and clarity is denied, even grounded people can unravel. He paints a picture of an infrastructure designed to look invisible. Private meetings with no minutes. Verbal advice delivered off-record. Reputation managers coordinating without emails. Lawyers present without ever speaking publicly. The objective, he claims, isn't truth or healing. It's containment. Keep panic from spreading. Keep liability from crystallizing. Keep questions from sticking. Media, in this telling, becomes both witness and accomplice. Tips arrive with warnings attached. Stories stall in legal review until momentum dies. Editors weigh access against accountability and choose survival. Charleston argues that this isn't corruption, it's economics. When access pays the bills, curiosity becomes expensive. What makes his commentary unsettling isn't the extremity of the claims, it's how familiar the mechanisms feel. The industry has practiced silence for decades. Careers are preserved through ambiguity. Harm is reframed as misunderstanding. And when someone pushes too hard, they're not attacked, they're ignored. In Hollywood, irrelevance is the cleanest erasure. He insists again that this isn't about assigning guilt or crafting villains. It's about exposing a culture where silence is rewarded and honesty is punished. Where private suffering is considered acceptable collateral as long as brands remain intact. Where trust erodes quietly until audiences sense something is wrong but can't name it. The most chilling allegation he makes is about timing. He claims that once whispers begin, the clock starts. The longer the public remains unaware, the safer everyone feels. And if enough time passes, the story doesn't need to be disproven. It simply expires. Attention moves on. The machine resets. By the end of his commentary, the question is